Hi, I'm Jeff Blumberg and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at MGE. This week's tip is part 1 of 3 on the subject of the do's and don'ts of additional locations. Now, some interesting things have developed over the last, I would say, 10 years in dentistry. Dr. Winteregg made a few videos about it, which you can watch. I made a little list for you here if you want to click and take a look. But specifically, there's been a supply and demand issue. We've actually, over the last 20, 30 years, made less dentists, and there's actually more practices available than there are dentists to buy them. So what you're seeing a lot of these days, especially I'm seeing it with MGE clients who are doing really well and expanding, is they're picking up additional locations. There's actually never been a better time. Now, additional locations can be a very good thing. They can be great, or they can be a nightmare. I've seen that scenario play out a number of times. And there's a few things you want to do to make sure that when you do add an additional location, or if you thought about it, that you do it right from the get-go. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm basing what I'm telling you off of things that I've observed. Obviously, you have to do things that are real for you, but I've observed a lot of these scenarios, and I hope my advice helps. Now, if a client is looking at adding an additional location, I normally ask them 8 questions, and here they are. First question is, why are you adding an additional location? What's the purpose behind it? What's your motivation? Second question is your house in order at your primary location? Third question is, where is this additional location going to be located? Fourth question is, are you going to work this additional location yourself, or are you going to put a partner in there, associate, etc.? Which brings me to the next question which is, are you going to have a partner in this location or just an associate? We then have question 6, which is, are you buying a scratch or an existing practice? Question 7 is, how are you going to staff it? And question 8 is, how are you going to administer the finances at this additional location? So let's talk about a little bit of each of these, and you can kind of see what direction I'm heading when I ask a client these questions. The first one is, why are you opening this additional location? What's the motivation? If your motivation for opening an additional office is you hate your first office, that's not a good motivation. If you're having problems in the first office and that is prompting you to want to go open another one, what's to say you're not going to carry the problems from office 1 over to office 2? The next thing might be, when I ask a client this question, I've had clients tell me that, I've got not enough space. I only have 2 chairs. I can't expand, etc. So I'm going to open a second office. Well, in cases like that, it might be better served that they actually just move, to somewhere nearby, to a space that accommodates more expansion. Now, if you're looking at opening a second location because the first location's doing fine and there's nothing wrong with it and you just want more, then that's not necessarily a bad motivation, and you might be well served opening location 2 or 3 or whatever it is that you're opening. The second question I'll ask a client is their house in order? Is their primary location in order? If you've got a bunch of fires and situations at location 1, and you go to location 2, you're going to continuously be dragged back in, and there's a good chance that you're going to perpetuate those same problems at location 2. So there's a few things you want to check out. A, are you staffed stably? Because if you're not staffed stably, you're going to end up with problems that suck you back into location 1. B, how is office 1 managed? Do you have a stable management in place? Again, the same concept. You're going to get dragged back into location 1. C, how are the statistics in location 1? Are you expanding or contracting? If you're contracting in location 1 and opening location 2, not necessarily the best deal for a number of different reasons, but I would want to see the office, at least location 1, at least slightly expanding. So the next point would be profitability. Is office 1 profitable? Let me paint a scenario for you. Let's say office 1 is profitable, assuming you're there all the time. Well, if you're planning on going and working office 2 and taking yourself out of office 1, that will cut your profitability at office 1. If there's not an excess amount, you could have problems. So I'd want to make sure office 1 was profitable enough, even with you gone partially, if that's part of the plan, to continue to support you while you get office 2 up and running off the ground. We then move to question 3. Where are you planning on locating this new office? Now, by that, I don't mean picking the ideal location, with the correct amount of traffic in the right part of town. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically referring to where is it with proximity to your first office. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. Obviously, if your second office, and you're planning on working in your second office, part-time at least, is hours and hours away from your first office, that could be a bit of a pain. So you have to consider this as you go. But more importantly, what I've seen people do is they'll locate office number 2 too close to office number 1. And some people think, oh, this is a great idea. You know, patients can float back and forth between office 1 and 2. It's actually a very bad idea. And I'll tell you why. Let's say later in your career, you decide you want to sell one of the offices. You want to sell office 2. Well, I want you to consider this for a minute. Imagine you're the dentist buying office 2, and the patients from office 2 float back and forth between office 1 and office 2. Think about this for a minute. So the person you're buying from is going to keep office 1, and they're selling office 2, but these patients float back and forth. Well, that pretty much kills the goodwill of the sale. I mean, I wouldn't buy something like that. I doubt that you would too, because what's to stop you from buying office, or stop this doctor from buying office 2 and having all these patients migrate to office 1 with the old doctor? So what you want to ask yourself when you're picking the location for your second office is, if you were to sell this second office, if you were the buyer, would you buy it? You know, with the proximity there is to office 1, if the original doctor owner was keeping office 1. Now, how far that could be, how far apart they have to be, really depends on locale. If you're in Manhattan, 20 blocks is a world away. 50 blocks is an entire other planet. If you're in a rural area, 20 miles might be too close. It really depends on the area that you're in, and it's more of a judgment call on your part. So those are the first 3 questions I ask when a client is looking at picking up an additional location. And that concludes this tip for this week. I'll be picking up next week with the next few questions. I'm hoping to get through at least 3. We'll see how I do. So if you've liked this tip, or if you've liked other tips on our channels, you can go ahead and subscribe to our channel by clicking below. You just go ahead and click, and you're informed of new videos as they come out. We put out about 1, sometimes more every week. The other thing I'll point out is that this video series is targeted primarily at GPs, general practicing dentists, or general dentists rather. If you're a specialist and you have additional questions that you feel you'd like to ask that maybe won't get answered in this video series, you can go ahead and email me at jeff@mgeonline.com. Happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, if you have any other questions about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. I'll see you next week.